This is the Predator tank, a classic, a marvel of a machine birthed from the dark age of technology. A symbol of humanity's might, it is very stylish, equipped with deadly weapons, available with optional spikes. It is an icon among Space Marine battle tanks. So then, why is it so shite? All of this and more in this Predator dissection. But first, specifically, what is a Predator tank in the functional sense? Well, it's an armored unit with two variants. The Predator Destructor is fitted with a Sirtis pattern autocannon, geared for combating heavy infantry and light vehicles, while the Predator Annihilator is fitted with a twin lascannon turret, positioned for combating other armored units. Both types can take either heavy bolter or lascannon sponsons, so you're free to mix and match, though the heavy bolter's profile is more similar to the autocannon, and so like is often paired with like. Regardless of the type and sponson combination, the Predator is certainly a battle tank. But there are 2 points I want to make clear. Unlike another iconic Space Marine vehicle, the Dreadnought, which can often exchange some ranged firepower for the option of melee combat functionality, the Predator tank is wholly dedicated to long-range firepower. And contrary to some of the other Rhino chassis derivatives, which offer unit transport capabilities, the Predator tank does not. Altogether, it cements the Predator as a dedicated ranged battle tank, with no melee combat utility or transport functionality. Within game systems, units are judged relative to other units, and for the goal of defining the Predator's state, comparing and contrasting it versus the Dreadnought from earlier will serve the purpose well. So let's go through these units and flesh out the criteria that speak to what these differences are on the tabletop. Toughness. Both units share a toughness characteristic of 7, a value considered standard for medium armored units. Armor save. Both units share a save characteristic of 3+, which makes sense since they are both armored units which belong to the Space Marines. Wounds. Here we have a difference. 8 wounds for the Dreadnought versus 11 for the Predator. At first glance this seems like a win for the Predator, but those who are enlightened will know that having more than 10 wounds means your unit has a degrading stat profile, and so the Predator's performance suffers as it loses wounds. All other functionally comparable stats are the same between these units, barring movement, where the Predator starts with double, dropping to the same, and ultimately dropping to half of the Dreadnought's movement characteristic. Already the Dreadnought is looking very comparable, but we have yet to touch on abilities. The Dreadnought has Duty Eternal, a fantastic ability that reduces any damage it suffers by 1. And just like that, the Dreadnought is beginning to have comparable resilience to the Predator, despite having less wounds while also not having a degrading stat profile. To clarify this point, here is a chart detailing attack groups that would deal fatal damage to the Predator. On the right we have those attacks going into the Predator, and on the left we have the Dreadnought. You can see at the extremes that Duty Eternal isn't making too much of a difference, but across the common medium damage values, Duty Eternal does allow the Dread to survive comparably, which culminates in the all 2 damage attack group, which actually allows the Dread to survive where the Predator would not. To add to that, Dreadnoughts also have the privilege of being core units. For those unfamiliar, it's a keyword that allows for more layering of abilities and buffs, which is no small detail. And then there is the points cost, which presently sees the Dreadnought at 140 to the Predator's 170. Those are points based on these units as you see them here. And given where we stand, we may as well pay another 15 points to take this Dread as a venerable Dreadnought, which now gives it superior accuracy to the Predator and a 6-up feel no pain to ignore wounds. And it's still less points than the Predator. There are also other supplementary points to add to the Dreadnought's favor, such as the board size now being smaller, and attachment organization often providing extra slots for elites over heavy support units. I'll let you guess which categories these guys fall into. So as you can see, there is a very clear cost to value problem here, but the issue is not with the Predator's cost relative to the Dreadnought. Rather, I posit the problem is much more fundamental. As illustrated earlier with the Dreadnought comparison, when a high-cost single-model unit has no inbuilt defensive mechanics, it discourages it as a choice. And that is only exacerbated when there exist many units of this type which have defensive abilities, some of which have multiple layers of defensive perks. Please note, I am disregarding smoke launchers as it relates to built-in defensive mechanics, as it's now a stratagem which costs a command point, and thus can only work with 1 unit per phase. though a reactive smoke launcher ability would have been a rather elegant solution to give the standard battle tanks a layer of defense. But I digress. So it would follow that any defensive mechanic would really help the Predator's validity. Even something like a 6-up invulnerable save, not unlike what another certain iconic Imperial tank possesses, though it has far better weaponry. More on that later. It at least gives the Predator the option to always attempt to save, even if it's a long shot. But it seems that GW likes to reserve invulnerable saves to represent force field type abilities. Except for when they don't. But if you like invulns to only be for barriers, why not opt for an ability like Layered Ceramite, which allows unmodified save rolls of 6 to always count as successes, effectively giving it a 6-up invulnerable save. Or if you want something less conservative, how about using that degrading stat line to manage a degrading defensive perk, where Layered Ceramite could offer a potent Feel No Pain to ignore wounds, one that drops off over time. I'm quite fond of this approach as it speaks to the old reinforced armor upgrade kit for the Predator tank. But perhaps every vehicle doesn't need to be resilient, with layers of defense, and a fair argument can definitely be made for that. However, if that is the verdict for the Predator, then surely my next point has even more credence. The other fundamental problem with the Predator is that it has a fairly underwhelming offensive potential, which is a crying shame, since as I pointed out earlier, it's a dedicated battle tank with the singular role of combating other units at range. But I should clarify, of the two variants, I think the Destructor's armaments are better off. Both the Predator autocannon and the heavy bolters are weapons that feature consistent multiple shots, which deal multiple points of damage. The area of lack in their profile is in their strength and AP characteristics, which makes them less optimal versus standard armored units. But for light vehicles or elite infantry, they are actually quite good. Though the same can't be said about the Predator Annihilator. This is because lascannons are poorly designed. I am going to take a brief detour and talk about the specifics here. Imagine, if you will, the enemy has a single model unit. Maybe it's a Predator tank, or a Fire Prism, or a Tyrannofex. It doesn't matter. What does matter is that it's a high toughness unit with multiple wounds and a good armor save. So you decide to fire your dedicated anti-tank weapon, the Lascannon. So you roll to hit. As a Space Marine, your ballistic skill is 3+. The odds are good. And it's a hit. The Lascannon's strength of 9 is high, greater than the target's toughness, so again the odds are in your favor. You roll, and it's a successful wound. Now the enemy gets to save. Thanks to the Lascannon's AP of -3 and the target's armor save of 3+, their roll required to save is a 6-up, bad odds. And sure enough, the enemy save roll fails. Now to deal the damage. Lascannons deal d6 damage, meaning it's the result of a 6-sided die roll. So you roll to determine the value. And it's a 1. You idiot! This result is disappointing, to put it mildly. Since the combat sequence demands each attack passes between 2 to 3 tests, all of which are dice-based, this result of 1 damage is effectively punishing the player for overcoming the aforementioned barriers. That's bad.
It's so bad.
And it creates absurd dissonance. To pass all the required tests for the heavy single-shot high-impact weapon to only yield the damage result of an autogun.
Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
Now, some people like to handwave this and say that when you deal 1 damage on a d6 weapon, it represents the shot being a glancing hit. And to that I say,
I don't think so.
Surely if that was the abstraction, such a result would be derived from the roll to hit interaction. On that note, if rolling a natural 6 to hit is always considered a success, does that mean it was a critical hit? How can my critical hit be a glancing hit? What if I also roll a 6 to wound? Is that a double critical? Why does my double critical deal only 1 damage? Naturally, it's a frustrating situation. Oh, are the game mechanics frustrating? That's bad design. Speaking generally, player frustration should be the result of their own decision-making during the playing of the game, and not caused by the mechanics and systems themselves. 8 months or so ago, when the weapon rework for 9th edition was revealed, I really felt the exclusion of lascannons was a missed opportunity. Not to say lascannons need to be OP. For instance, it is appropriate that an Eldar Darklance is far deadlier than an Imperial lascannon, though there is a happy medium we can reach. And so, here's my hot take. lascannons should deal d6 damage, clamped at minimum 2, thus allowing even the worst random result to still feel significant and not comparable to what would be dealt by small arms weapons, all while keeping lascannon damage probability inferior to the d3 plus 3 or 2d3 damage profiles. Back to the Predator Annihilator, but suppose GW doesn't want to change lascannon damage profiles, despite the airtight argumentation presented here. Well, the Predator's underwhelming offensive lack can still be remedied with some choice mechanics. A tasteful approach, I think, is a callback to when Predators felt deadly, but implemented in a more functional manner. Bring back Killshot as an ability where Predators can add 1 to wound rolls and damage when targeting a monster/vehicle, but cap it with 2 restrictions. This only works on its heavy weapons, and only if all of its attacks are declared into the same target. And yes, this caveat is pulled from Eradicators, but Eradicators are also a unit which are positioned in the singular role of only existing to destroy other units. So this Predator ability functioning similarly makes good sense, though I think Predators make a stronger argument for such a potent ability. I can't help but feel it is likely that this lack will only worsen as time goes on. Demon engines are now as accurate as standard vehicles, on top of their existing multiple defensive perks. And there is also that Sisters of Battle Predator around the corner, which I suspect will have better offensive and defensive profiles compared to the classic Preds. Well, that's a wrap on this one. Thanks for watching. And a special thanks to my patrons, Julius Maximus, as well as the others who help keep the dream alive. This was my Predator dissection. I think we can all agree that the Predator tanks are presently very underwhelming and in dire need of some help. So I want to hear from you. What units do you feel are comparatively unfavored by poor rules? Let me know in the comments below. So if you enjoyed this video, there's a like button, and if you want to help my channel grow, there is a subscribe button. There is also a bell button and a share button, so press the buttons you want to press. And with that, I hope to see you guys in the next one.